In today's DevOps era, there is increasing pressure to speed time to market. To meet this demand, organizations are relying on increasing number of tech stacks, deployment models, and open source software without clear security requirements. It would be understatement to say that modern software is growing in complexity. As a result, 75% of vulnerabilities are application related. Yet, there is no prescriptive and measurable way to analyze and improve software assurance posture for many of the organizations. To address these challenges, we recently released OWASP SAMM 2.0. My name is Hardik Parekh, and I'm here to share my knowledge about how to navigate DevOps security journey at scale with OWASP Software Assurance Maturity Model version 2. I started my career as a software engineer. Like many of you, I got an opportunity to lead various security teams and programs at medium and large companies. I'm also on advisory board for a few security and data privacy startups and a nonprofit organization called CompTIA. However, throughout my career, I always contributed back to the industry through various communities such as Safe Code Publications, SANS Top 25 Programming Errors, CVSS version 3.0, BSIMM, and most recently OWASP SAMM. For those of you who might not be familiar with BSIMM, BSIMM is a rather software security maturity model which is descriptive in nature. It was developed by Cigital by interviewing 6 independent software vendors from SafeCode founding member companies. And EMC was one of these companies. It's more of a descriptive model of what activities other security organizations are performing at each maturity level. I started contributing to OWASP SAMM back in 2016 and have been a co-author and one of the core members of OWASP SAMM project ever since then. Now, before we start the talk, I would like to get some legal stuff out of the way. I'm not speaking on behalf of my current or previous employers, nor am I here as a representative of my current or previous employers. My opinions are solely my own, and they do not reflect those of my current or previous employers. Now, let's look at a quick agenda. I assume many of you might not be familiar with OWASP SAMM. Hence, I'll spend some time on introducing OWASP SAMM, covering what is SAMM, why do we need a model like SAMM, the core principles, and the project history. After that, I will go over the changes we introduced in SAMM 2.0 or version 1.5. And last, we will discuss how to apply SAMM in your organization to navigate DevOps security journey at scale. First of all, let's look at what is SAMM. OWASP SAMM is one of the flagship OWASP projects. And the flagship status is given to projects with strategic importance to both OWASP and AppSec in general. OWASP SAMM is a framework for software assurance that provides effective and measurable way for all types of organizations to analyze and improve their software security posture that is tailored to the specific risks facing that particular organization. SAMM comes with full of resources that will help with evaluation of organizations' current security practices and providing recommendations or suggestions for growing and maturing those practices, providing a way to demonstrate concrete improvements over a period of time, defining and measuring security activities throughout the lifecycle. One of the big benefits of SAMM is that it is vendor agnostic. SAMM can be done in-house, or you could have one of those several AppSec consulting firms help you with the assessment and creating plans and roadmaps to navigate your security journey. Now, why do we need a model like SAMM? In a quest to increase speed, today's organization is growing in complexity, and many times there is no clear security requirements. As a result, almost 75% of the vulnerabilities are application related. If you look at latest security breaches like Equifax or Capital One, they are more application related. To standardize security activities in such a complex software environment, we need a model like OWASP SAMM. I like this quote from George Box, who has been called one of the greatest statistical minds of 20th century. The most that can be expected from any model is that it can supply a useful approximation to reality. All models are wrong, and some models are useful. I repeat, all models are wrong, and some models are useful. The point is that you can't find a model that is exactly describing the reality. There are too many variables in the real life. but you can have a model that is close enough to be useful, and that is what SAM is aspiring to be. SAM was defined with flexibility and versatility in mind, such that it can be utilized by small startups, mid-sized organizations, as well as very large organizations using any style of development methodology. Additionally, this model can be applied organization-wide for a single line of business or even for an individual project. SAM is both measurable and actionable. It defines maturity levels across business functions and provides clear pathways for improving the maturity levels, thus providing the step-by-step navigation plan to achieve higher levels of maturity. Let's look at a project history a little bit. So very first version of SAM was originally created through the project OpenSAM, led by Praveer Chandra, an independent software security consultant. After a number of years, around 2015, a small group got together at OWASP and worked together to breathe some life into this project, and it became OWASP SAM project. The very first version after that, the 1.1 version, it expanded and restructured its predecessor into 4 complementary resources: core document, how-to guide, quick start guide, and a tool sheet. Back in 2017, we released 1.5 of SAM, which incorporates a refinement of the scoring model to provide more granular scoring and assessment. And we recently launched SAM 2.0 in February 2020, where we have changed the measurement model one more time to add qualitative measurement. To represent how well an organization is performing a particular security practice, in addition, we made few structural changes as well. As a result, SAM 2.0 is not backward compatible. Now, SAM is built on few core principles. First, an organization's behavior changes slowly over time. Changes need to be smaller and iterative to really take hold and make a difference. The second is there is no single recipe that works for all organizations, and SAM is built with that in mind and supports an organization building a program that is tailored to their risk profile, culture, as well as existing maturity level. Third, the guidance related to security activities must be prescriptive. Too often, security initiatives fail due to very poor details, lack of communication, or invalid assumptions. Overall, the success of the program will be based on being simple, well-defined, and measurable. Now, let's look at maturity levels and the assessment scores. SAM is defined in 3 levels of maturity: ad hoc provisioning, increased efficiency, and comprehensive mastery at scale, mainly through the automation. Unlike other security maturity model and SAM predecessors, there are 4 levels of assessment scores for each security activity, which make fine-grained improvements very visible. No implementation, implementation across few or some of the projects, implementation across at least half of the projects, and implementation across many or most projects. Now, not everyone needs to make level 3 in all different areas. Similar to Six Sigma or CMMI, the goal is not to max out on each and every different practice. The goal is honestly to define and follow the practice which is addressing the particular security risk your organization is facing. And to be honest, it would not even be the most useful resources utilization for your organization if you try to maximize in each and every different practice that SAM suggests. What a target maturity should be for your organization is largely up to you, depending on the 2 main things: business drivers and the risk that your organization is facing. In version 1.5, we have modified the scoring model to provide multiple choice answers to allow for more accurate assessment. If you look at the previous SAM versions and most models, the questions were pretty much yes or no, which is great from very academic point of view, but in real world, we all know that the answer many times lies in between the 2. For example, if you try to answer the following question for education and guidance at SAM level 2, are those involved in development process given role-specific security training and guidance? You know you have trained some of the developers, and would you like to train some project managers and QA testers? But given the question, do you answer yes or no? The dilemma is that if you answer no, you get no credit, and it looks like you aren't working on it, but actually you are. And if you answer yes, you now get full credit and may have issue down the road asking for training budget for other roles because the dashboard says you already did this. With the new model, you can answer something like some or at least half and get the partial credit, but also have the ability to show improvements in your score when you finish the initiative to train the other roles. So based on user feedback, we have made changes to the measurement model. In SAM version 2.0, we are assessing activities along two axes, the coverage by means of questions and the quality by means of mandatory criteria. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this slide. This is just to give you a glimpse of what was the SAM version 1.5 for those of you who might not be familiar. SAM was defined at a high level, like in 3 different levels. And at highest level, SAM 1.5 defined 4 critical business functions. Each business function had 3 security practices, and each security practice had 3 maturity levels. Now, one would ask, what are the motivations behind a new version? So there are about 5 different motivations. Number 1 was to align the recent development methodologies such as Agile, DevOps, to make it development methodology agnostic. Version 1.5 and its predecessors look more suitable for waterfall development methodology, even though it was not meant to. We realized that it's missing key aspects of guidance in terms of how security build and deployment of the software, especially since CI/CD has become integral part of the Agile DevOps methodology. Second is improved measurement. Even though SAM 1.5 addressed the feedback about granularity levels, it still didn't address the question how well an activity is being performed, thus needing some qualitative measurement. Third motivation was to avoid orphan or unrelated activities. So there are quite few security activities in 1.5 and 1.1 where defined such that it lacked consistent theme across different levels of maturity within a security practice, which also resulted in few orphan or unrelated activities such as code signing. It didn't have anything related in the maturity level 1, and it didn't have anything related in maturity level 3. So it was kind of creating more like an orphan activity. The fourth motivation is to arrange maturity levels in order of increasing difficulty. Other shortcoming of 1.5 and 1.1 where sometimes security activities at higher levels were easier to implement compared to security activities at lower levels, which didn't really make sense. So we had to address that one. The fifth motivation was to improve the production process. Last but not least, SAM production process was also slow and waterfall, resulting in very big major overhaul every time we had to create a new version. So these are the 5 motivations behind coming up with SAM version 2.0. At high level, this is the version 2.0 framework. And areas highlighted here are changes from SAM version 1.5, which we'll cover in a few minutes. SAM version 2.0 is defined in 3 different levels. At the highest level, SAM defines 5 critical business functions. Each business function is a category of activities related to the nuts and bolts of software development. For each business function, SAM defines 3 security practices. Each security practice is an area of security-related activities that build assurance for a respective business function. For each security practice, SAM defines 3 levels as objectives. And each level within a security practice is characterized by successively more sophisticated objective and more stringent success metrics than the previous levels. Overall, as you increase the level of maturity, you should expect higher cost of implementation. If you look at the framework, you can see that governance is more focused on the program itself, looking at some strategic elements such as strategy and metrics, policy and compliance, education and guidance, etc. We have renamed the construction business function into design and introduced a new business function called implementation. Design, implementation, verification, and operations cover the core of software development lifecycle. Design is focused on threat assessment and security requirements during the earlier phases. Implementation is focused on secure build, secure deployment, and defect management aspects. Verification is more focused on testing and verifying aspects. And the operations is focused on incident detection and management, environment management, where application lives on. SAMM 2.0 core model. So let's look at the security practices. Each security practice is divided into two streams, A and B. The purpose of these streams is to align and link activities within the practice or different maturity levels. And each stream has an objective to be reached. And this objective can be reached in increasing level of maturity. This way, we ensure that there are no orphan activities that seem only relevant on a single maturity level. For instance, code signing, as we discussed in the previous version. Now, let's look at activity streams and maturity levels. So let's look at requirements-driven testing under verification business function. The goal of the requirements-driven testing practice is to ensure that implemented security controls operate as expected and satisfy project's stated security requirements. Requirements-driven testing security practice is divided into two streams: control verification and misuse and abuse testing. The former verifies application security controls, satisfies stated security requirements, and validates their correct functioning. These requirements are typically functional in nature. Negative testing addresses the quality of the implementation of security controls and aims to detect unexpected design flaws and implementation bugs through the misuse and abuse testing. These streams align and link the activities in the practice or different maturity levels. Each stream has an objective to be reached, and this objective can be reached as we go higher up in the maturity levels. It does so by incrementally building a set of security test and regression cases and executing them regularly. In its most advanced forms, the practice promotes security stress testing, such as denial of service, and strives to continuously improve application security by consistently automating security unit test cases and creating security regression test cases for all bugs identified and fixed. Now let's look at secure build process. Now, this practice focuses on creating a consistently repeatable, secure build process and accounting for security of application dependencies. The secure build practice emphasizes the importance of building software in a standardized and repeatable manner, and of doing so using secure components, including third-party software dependencies. This is where tools like Snyk come in handy. The first stream focuses on removing any subjectivity from the build process by striving full automation. An automated build pipeline can include additional automated security checks such as SAST and DAST to gain further assurance and flag security regressions early by failing the build, for example. The second stream acknowledges the prevalence of software dependencies in modern applications. It aims to identify them and track their security status in order to contain the impact of their insecurity on otherwise secure applications. In a most advanced form, it applies similar security checks to software dependencies as to the application itself. This is where tools like OWASP Dependency Check, OWASP Dependency Track, and Snyk comes in handy. Now let's look at secure deployment practice, which is also another new practice that we introduced in version 2.0. Now this practice focuses on automatically securing deployments to the production environment and all required secrets. One of the final stages in delivering secure software is ensuring security and integrity of developed applications are not compromised during their deployment. To this end, the practice's first stream focuses on removing manual error by automating the deployment process as much as possible and making its success contingent upon outcomes of integrated security verification checks. It also fosters separation of duties by making adequately trained non-developers responsible for the deployment. The second stream goes beyond the mechanisms of deployment and focuses on protecting the privacy and integrity of sensitive data, such as passwords, tokens, and other secrets required for application to operate in production environments. In its simplest form, suitable production secrets are moved from repositories and configuration files into adequately managed digital vaults. In more advanced forms, secrets are dynamically generated at deployment time and routine processes detect and mitigate the presence of any unprotected secrets in the production environment. Now, my goal is to arm you with knowledge so that you can apply OWASP SAMM starting next business day when you go back to your company. So let's look at how to apply this model in your organization. The very typical approach rolling out SAMM 2.0 model includes implementing these phases in continuous fashion. But before we do that, we need to spend some time preparing. This phase is the most critical phase for success of OWASP SAMM application in your organization. I have witnessed several organizations who skipped this phase, which resulted in derailing their efforts. It consists of following 4 activities: defining the scope, which includes identifying if you would like to roll out OWASP SAMM across the whole organization, across a particular business unit, or at an individual application or project level. Once you define the scope, you need to identify key stakeholders and get their buy-in and input. Once you get stakeholder buy-in, you should start spreading the word and evangelize the SAMM activities. Now let's look at the assessment phase. To measure current level of maturity, you need to start with assessments by conducting interviews with key stakeholders to evaluate current security practices. We recommend in-person interviews versus sending out email or Slack messages. This way, you can explain the key intent behind any activity and clarify any potential doubts. There are 3 ways in which you could perform an assessment: the lightweight assessment, detailed assessment, and hybrid assessment. The lightweight assessment, as the name suggests, is simply interviewing key stakeholders and recording their responses. During detailed assessment, you ask for evidence for performance and quality of each activity being performed. The most useful assessment model, in my experience, after doing many assessments, is hybrid assessment, where you ask for evidence on a need-to-know basis for some of the activities and not all. I personally use this hybrid assessment model. And also, most of the time, it also depends if you are using external security consultant versus if you are doing assessment in-house. When you are doing in-house, hybrid assessment is the most useful. But if you are coming from outside, or if you're inviting an external assessment agency, they may want to do detailed assessment. Now, once you record all these responses, you can assign maturity levels using the SAMM worksheet. Now, how do we calculate maturity score? So finally, we came up with new scoring model, which will still primarily based on the coverage criteria. However, we added quality criteria for each question to add another dimension to the score. Our guidance is to score 0 if quality criteria are not met. Going back to one of these SAMM core principles of simplicity, we decided to add quality criteria for each question. This way, time to complete an assessment did not significantly increase with SAMM 2.0. Overall maturity score for the security practice is calculated by taking average of maturity level 1 between stream A and stream B and adding that to each level of maturity. Now, once you finish an assessment, you need to define the target as per your organization's business drivers and risk profile. It is very important to spend some time understanding your organization's business drivers and risk profile during this exercise. Once you define the target, the most important step is to estimate the cost of implementation. Again, in my experience, I've seen many SAMM initiatives fail when folks forget to estimate and plan increased cost of implementation, resulting in lack of resources dedicated to security improvements that they plan for. So the cost of implementation would become direct input into defining a plan. During this step, you need to determine change schedule as per upcoming release and develop or update roadmap plan over the next 4 or 5 phases. Now, we recommend implementing SAMM changes over minimum of 3 phases and maximum of 5 phases. And each phase can span between 3 to 4 months up to 12 months. In order to focus on the highest impact, you should start with very high impact security improvements such as training and awareness, as well as threat assessments. Now, once the plan is defined, you start implementation. implement activities using SAM 2.0 guide, and leverage other OWASP projects. SAM aspires to be an umbrella project for all OWASP projects. That means each OWASP project can map back to one of the SAM business functions and security practices. Here are some example OWASP projects and how they map back to various SAM business functions. Now, there are OWASP projects that can map to multiple SAM business functions, such as OWASP Top 10 and OWASP Mobile Top 10 as well. After the implementation, we need to create and update scorecards on regular interval by capturing scores from before and after an iteration of assurance program build out and communicate these progresses to the management. I've used these scorecards to demonstrate and communicate security improvements to the highest level of management in the companies that I work for. And this helps management visualize the progress in overall security improvements, which results in to even more support rolling out the next phase of security improvements for OWASP SAM initiative. Now, these are some of the available resources we have to get you started using SAM 2.0. All these resources are linked to the owaspsam.org website. So if you don't remember anything, just remember this website, owaspsam.org. We now have online SAM 2.0 calculator donated by Concord USA, an online SAM 2.0 dashboard, which is also contributed by one of the community members, Satish Ashwin, which can be used if you don't want to use SAM toolkit that comes with the OWASP SAM project. And at high level, OWASP SAM toolkit is basically a collection of Google Docs and Excel spreadsheet, which helps you assess the score and create and build out your SAM implementation roadmap. One more thing I would like to bring up before I conclude this talk. We recently introduced SAM Benchmark Initiative, which helps answer the question, how do I compare to other organizations? SAM Benchmark Initiative is inspired by BSIMM. The goal of this project is to collect the most comprehensive data set relative to organizational maturity of the application or software security programs. And there are two different ways in which we are collecting the data. One is a completely anonymous data collection. And second one is a verified data collection. You pick and choose whatever suits your need or whatever makes you feel comfortable. If you have any questions, feedback, or input, these are some of the resources. We have this Project SAM Slack channel, and all our resources are at this GitHub. So please provide your question, feedback, input either through Slack channel, or you can contribute. If there is anything you want to contribute, you can contribute to the GitHub project. As someone said, proof of the pudding is in eating it. If you haven't yet, I invite you to please start using SAM version 2.0 starting tomorrow. Hopefully, I'll come back to Snyk conference next year to discuss the lessons learned. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. This is my email, and you can always connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd like to thank SnykCon organizers, volunteers, and sponsors for putting together such a great conference, and looking forward to presenting at SnykCon next year. And thanks to all of you for listening to this talk.